Aloha no, and welcome to Long Story Short on PBS Hawaii. I'm Leslie Wilcox. The Honolulu Skylark. I remember the first time I heard her on the radio. It wasn't just the beauty of her voice or the image of a skylark that held me. It was her knowledge and understanding of Hawaii people, music, history, values. In the radio industry, where companies tend to come and go, the Honolulu Skylark has made a lasting impression. We'll catch up with her next.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, produced with Sony Technology, is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in HD. High definition, it's in Sony's DNA.
The Honolulu Skylark is Jacqueline Rossetti. Her warm voice and warm personality became a fixture in island radio in the mid-1970s. Since then, she's been named Hawaiʻi Broadcaster of the Year and Outstanding Hawaiian Woman of the Year. Today, she lives and works on Hawaii Island, where she's known simply as Skylark.
You know, when people talk about you, they say popular radio personality, Honolulu Skylark, or beloved personality, and they say something with you that I don't hear about them saying with other DJs. It's influential radio personality. What happened? What did you do?
I think I listened, Leslie. I had a passion and care for keeping our culture alive. I wanted to know why songs were written. I didn't want to just hear the songs. I wanted to talk to the composers. And so I armed myself with going out and meeting them, caring about why they wrote a particular song, what inspired them. I wanted to hear about the careers of people that I had heard their music over the years. One of my favorite people, Alvin Kaleolani Isaacs, his big band, syncopated swing era. I loved that. And so he said, why would you want to be interested in talking to me? I said, because you did this. You were the ambassador of good cheer in the 30s. Why did they call you that, Uncle Alvin? And so I would sit with them and they would tell me their stories.
Well, you're going back to the 30s now. How did you know about them?
Well, because I had old 78s. I collected records. You know, Mom kept her collection, and that's what started my collection, because she would have to practice her hula to these old recordings. And so I started listening to them, and I loved the swing era. And I loved that sound of Hawaiian music with big band. And so when I had the opportunity to seek these people out, I wanted to make sure that their stories were told, or that somebody could, you know, share them with the rest of the audience so that we could all learn about that era of Hawaii.
At that time, was there Hawaiian music on the air?
There was one station, and that's why I was so excited about getting an opportunity to work there, was KCCN. They were the
AM?
only, it was an AM station. It was from sunrise to midnight. And it went off the air at midnight, and it was an opportunity to share. And I have to laugh because back then it was the other side of Hawaiian music, as Crash Kealoha, who was the program director at the time, would call it. They were doing the funky hula, and they were doing, you know, all this different kinds of hapaole almost music. And I wanted to bring back the Hawaiian, the traditional Hawaiian. I wanted to hear Genoa Keawe on the radio again, because she wasn't being heard. I wanted to hear some of the traditional music.
And did they think that was old school
They
and wouldn't draw an
did,
audience?
and they said,
people
well,
don't care.
No, and I kept saying, no, they do want to hear about this. I wanted to play chants. I opened my show every morning with a chant because I felt that was important for us to hear, that we came from, you know, beats and chanting before. And every program that I watched as a child growing up, with Aloha festivals, you had a chanter come out and welcome everybody. And I wanted that when I performed and did my radio show. So I would open my shows with chants and explain what those chants were about. And people started to listen. They, you know, they hadn't heard the language translated in quite some time.
And then you would get a chance to do something that radio executive Mike Kelly would say changed the radio landscape of Honolulu forever.
Is that putting Hawaiian music on the FM band?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, somebody didn't want it. I don't know why. they didn't feel that Hawaiian music was worthy enough for FM or something. I don't know. Every format had been covered in FM, but Hawaiian music. And I said, why don't you put Hawaiian music on the FM band? And they said, well, will you do it? I said, absolutely. Why shouldn't it be on the FM band? Well, what kind of music would you play? Hawaiian music. Well, you wouldn't put the chants on FM, would you? Yes, I would. You know, and so it was an opportunity here, chanting in stereo and music that has been recorded in stereo for years, but never on a stereo band. It was exciting. It was a wonderful time period.
A popular broadcaster today, Billy Von Ostall, says you were his radio kumu. And he was so thrilled when you called him over to work at KCCN FM, and he said basically, you folks built the studio.
We did. I mean, we hammered the nails, and we, I mean, from the ground up. There was nothing but an empty room, and they said, go put a radio station in there, and that's exactly what we did.
And once you got this traditional Hawaiian format going, how did it do?
It did really well, Leslie. I was amazed at how many people were listening. I had no idea that the young kids would gravitate to it so well. I thought, okay, sure, we add a little color with the Jamaican music, and you know that would keep the young kids. And then we get the kupunas and have their style of traditional Hawaiian music. But could it actually blend, and would it actually work? And it did. We did a concert at the Aloha Tower. It was the first of many, which now has become the FM 100 birthday bashes, right? And we took over Aloha Tower at the time because it was gutted, it was empty. And I couldn't believe how many kids showed up. We thought maybe 100 kids. There was 3,000 people the first concert we threw. And it was Kapena and Ho'aikane and just our local bands. It was nobody, you know, fabulous to come and see, just kids that wanted to play music. And pretty soon we did these on a monthly basis. And we had to move out of Aloha Tower. There was no room for us anymore. And that's what started the first FM 100 birthday bash at the Waikiki show.
Na Hoku Hanohano, you are a 3-time award winner. And I always hear your name when people talk about the founding of the Hoku Hanohano Awards. Tell me about it.
It started as our small little radio station promotion. We realized that, you know, in 1 year, we had doubled the amount of recordings. And I said to Crash, look at this. We had 36 records this year recorded, and the next year it's up to 77. And he said, we should do something about it. We should honor these people in the recording industry. And as a small little radio station promotion, it turned into the Hawaii Academy of Recording Arts, and we mimicked ourselves after the Grammy Awards because we thought that's what we could be, a Hawaiian Grammy Award.
Did you have a budget for it?
Oh yeah, all of $300. We had to beg and barter, and back then we, you know, went to the Alamoana Hotel and said, do you want to have this event? And they looked at us like, Hawaiian music? Yeah, we want to honor our Hawaiian music. And it's interesting because people like Melvine Lead, they could walk down the street and nobody knew who they were. Now Melvine Lead walks down the street and she's a star, you know, and we sort of, you know, did that. We made stars of our own entertainers that were just going unnoticed in our lifestyles.
You knew Brada Israel Kamakawiwa Ole, very well. And I've read that you pointed out something about him, which is that he really didn't come prepared to the studio.
Never.
And as a result, if, for example, in the song that has gone platinum all over the world, you know, you hear some incorrect lyrics and
lots of incorrect
consolidated lyrics. He changes chords.
Israel's own interpretation of what the song is supposed to sing like, and it's because he gets inspired. And you go into the studio and he'll just sing whatever comes to his heart. He must have been 13 or 14 years old when I first met him, and they would call me up on the radio. I wasn't at KCCN at the time. I worked at a station that KNDI at midnight played Hawaiian music when KCCN went off the air. And I think that's what lured them to have me come to join KCCN, was I was doing a midnight to 8 in the morning Hawaiian music show. And the entertainers were calling in and listening to me.
And I bet Iz called you all the time.
He did, he and Skippy.
And he continued to do that most of his life, called folks up and had a say.
He did. He loved radio. That kept them entertained. And he said, come on out to Makaha. I have this group. I want you to hear us. And I went out there, and there they were, just these kids in, puka clothes, and but their harmonies and their voices and their family unit was so endearing, and I just loved them. And I brought them to KCCN and did their first recording, and we started playing. That's when we could play bootleg music on the air, and so that's how they started in their career.
And you went and sought them out, and they knew it.
Yeah, they did.
You gave them a voice they really didn't have. But what would move you to go all the way to Makaha to talk to a couple of teenage boys about their music?
Once I drove into their yard and Mama and Daddy was on the porch, I said, oh my gosh, I found myself home. And I just, they were just a sweet family, opened up their hearts to us and to me, and I felt like home.
Skylark's passion for the people and traditions of Hawaii resonated with listeners at a time that Hawaiian music and culture were going through a renaissance. That's when she really found her voice.
Well, let's go back.
Okay.
Till way before the Honolulu Skylark emerged. Where'd you grow up? What was your growing up like?
It was a wonderful Hawaiian family. The Mahis is my mother's background. She had 10 brothers and sisters.
Are you related to Aaron Mahi, the
That's
former band leader?
That's my first cousin, yeah. His father and my mother are brother and sister. So we have, there was 10 children in that family, and they all had 4 or 5 children each. And so we had a wonderful family home in Kalihi, where my grandfather lived. And our families built their beach house in some property that my grandmother had, right across from what we call Baby Beach Park in Ka'ava. So our family spent weekends in Ka'ava and weekdays going to schools and in the Kalihi area. So
when you say it was a Hawaiian upbringing, what does that mean?
When you're in a Hawaiian family, you learn nurturing of values and living off the land. And we did things like hukilau and did our own imu and kalua pig and fished. And it was just a warm family thing. We all slept together in the same beds, and we all bathed together, and it was that kind of a family.
Rossetti doesn't sound terribly Hawaiian.
No, my father is pure Italian, and Mama and Daddy met in Pearl Harbor. And he just loved our family and became more Hawaiian almost than my mother. She wanted to be Americanized. You know how that was.
That was
back
the generation,
then. That
World
was
War II.
that generation. And Dad wanted to be Hawaiian. He wanted to learn to fish and hukilau and do all of those things. And so he gravitated more to being Hawaiian than Mama did. And he loved the brothers and sisters and just got along very well with them. So.
And traditional Hawaiian music, when did that come into your life?
I think it had always been surrounded my life. My father, and I have to give him credit because he loved things Hawaiian, and during our raising up, Dad was involved with something called Aloha Week back then, and he surrounded us with just wonderful mentors that were our aunties. I didn't know that they weren't really related to us because we always had, everybody was aunt and uncle.
So your pure Italian dad,
Yes.
and not your full-blooded Hawaiian mom introduced you to this.
Yes, and he was, hanai'd by Auntie Iolani Luahine and Auntie Sis Wiedemann and these wonderful pillars of Hawaiiana, and they nurtured my father in this business. I remember watching Auntie Iolani dancing at Iolani Palace in these beautiful Hawaiian pageants, and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to keep our culture alive.
Well, I never saw her dance in person. Is it true what people said, that when she danced, it was as if something else was inside her, living through her?
Absolutely. Auntie enjoyed an inu. And when we were at parties after the big pageantry, she would have an inu or two. And then all of a sudden she'll hear a song that somebody's dancing or singing, and she became a whole different person. And you'd look at her like, what happened? What possessed her? And she'd just start dancing or chanting, or she was just a marvelous woman. And then after that, it was power was like, oh, where am I?
When
She's
she went back
back at the
to,
party.
hanging out at the party.
Absolutely. And she was just a gracious, lovely lady.
So your dad worked for Aloha Week or volunteered for Aloha
It was
Week?
a volunteer thing for over 40 years of his life. He's a director emeritus. If you look at I don't know where we are with that right now, and it breaks my heart terribly to see an organization like that starting to fall apart on the neighbor islands. But it got me to see what life on Kauai was like, what life on Molokai was like, because we would go from week to week to the different islands, meet some wonderful people who all cared about the culture. I don't know if you remember, we used to spend time at Ala Moana Park when there was an Ulumau village, and they had all the little places that you could go and visit and learn your culture, and pound poi and watch them weave. And it was a marvelous time to grow up.
And later they moved that to by Heiakea.
Heiakea, but it wasn't the same as in Ala Moana Park, where it was closer to the people and people could come and visit.
And that's what Waikiki is trying to move toward now, having lost some of that authenticity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here we are. You're going to Kamehameha. What did they infuse you with Hawaiian?
I think there was wonderful people up there like Auntie Nona Beamer, who was encouraging you to, learn hula and to dance. And I had always been a part of the music scene. Mama was a hula dancer with Hilo Hattie, and she toured with the Alki Aloha Perry show and danced at the Lexington Hotel in New York. And so she had always had her music with us, and she always taught us hula. And then we went to a formal training in our neighborhood where we grew up in Foster Village with Auntie Rose Joshua. So at the age of 5, we were dancing hula and chanting and, uniki by the age of 15. And, I didn't know what that was back then, but it was just a part of how we grew up, and how brothers and sisters would drum and beat the tin cans or the cracker cans in those days for the Tahitian music. And it was hula schools where you learned ancient hula, Awana hula, Samoan dancing, Tahitian dancing, and Marin dancing.
We talked earlier about the Hawaiian Renaissance, which one of the highlights of that period, besides the return of traditional music, was Kaho olawe and freeing the island from target bombings by the military. Were you involved in that?
Well, you remember the gentleman who started the theme and raised the theme of Aloha Aina, Aloha Awareness. Entertainer, musician, and a dear friend, George Helm. In fact, I named my son after him. That's how close we were. It's a wonderful family of Molokai. And, he could sing, and his beautiful voice would transcend to the kupuna. And then when he would talk to them about Aloha Aina, they could relate to him. And then he started to say, this island is not a desolate rock. Don't bomb it. I live right there. I can hear this. It's paining me to watch this smoke go up. Why are we continuing to do this? And it was his thought, his vision of freeing that island from the harshness of the bombing and watching the red dirt surround the islands. It almost looked like it was bleeding. The island was bleeding of its red dirt. And he said, we've got to stop this. He went to the legislature, and I'm sure people can look at the history books. He gave his life for that island. And I think we were in the early stages. Women were like Auntie Emma DeFries, who I was studying under at the time, a dear friend who I grew up with, Auntie Frenchie DeSoto, said, do you want to go to the island? And this was in the days when nobody was going to the island. They had just arrested the 9 protesters on the island, and they were giving us an opportunity to go in legally and to look at the island. And I was one of those first 17 on board. We were called the First Warriors, as they call us today. But we went to take the kupuna to see that they could see that it wasn't just a rock. We weren't bombing just a rock.
Did you feel any mana or anything special on that island?
Oh, you could feel the island. You can still feel the island today if you go to Kaho olawe. It's chicken skin. You were there with your camera and you saw how beautiful that island is. And, to walk the ancient trails and to see, poi pounders and shell carvings that you don't see on any other island except Kaho olawe. It was exciting. Dr. Patrick Kirch did this whole study that we were a part of, and we looked at how the sentiments of the earth and how the people. It was just magical, wonderful.
You're telling me something I didn't know. Do you think it was George Helm who bridged? He went from music to cultural.
I think it was. I think he had this magical voice that could attract people to listen to him, and then he could tell his story. He could say, "Hey, this island needs to stop this bombing. And I think that's the way he got the message across.
And that was a multi-generational protest and rally, and in the end, very successful.
And he got, yes.
Now we can't free the island of all the ordnance.
And you know, it's sad because here we thought that was what was going to happen with all that money being dumped into, we were going to be able to get it all off the island. And as when we were there, we had no idea we were trouncing around with live ordnance on the island. Mm-hmm. You know, and here we are taking kupunas and flying them from districts. And Inez Ashdown, who was raised on the island, you know, was in our party, and she was telling the story of how the goats were here and this water tank was here. And, you know, we had no idea that we were trouncing her through live ordnance. But we were passionate, we were so excited at the time to document these stories. And Uncle Harry Mitchell being with us, and, you know, him sharing his passion for the island because his son, and it was a wonderful time.
Rich cultural experiences have shaped Jacqueline Skylark Rossetti's life. Today, she's a single mom living in Hilo. She wanted a much more country lifestyle for her children. She's still broadcasting and still promoting the Hawaiian culture.
PBSHawaii.org is your online resource for program schedules and information on PBS shows and local productions. Log on and connect to Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox to download transcripts from this and all episodes. Get online and get interactive at PBSHawaii.org.
You're still the Honolulu Skylark, but for the last almost 20 years, you've had a neighbor island perspective.
You know, it's interesting because I grew up on Oahu in a rural area right across from Radford High School in a little village called Foster Village. And we had cow pastures in the backyard and chickens. And so to me, moving to Hilo, where my mother is from, it was almost like I had to, because that's what I wanted my children to grow up knowing, was a rural area where we could have dogs and cats and not live in an apartment, or, you know, the hustle and bustle of how Honolulu had changed so. And I could go down the street and wave to my neighbor and he would wave back to me. I mean, that's what I grew up knowing. And that's what I still look at Hilo as a wonderful place to ensure that the foundation for my children was there.
Are you happy with the state of Hilo radio?
I think it's unique, it's growing, it's changing. You know, we don't command the advertising dollars that we could get with Honolulu, but we're a unique market. And I enjoy, again, like I did with the old kupunas, going out and meeting who these people are, what they're doing. We have wonderful farmers like Richard Ha doing some wonderful things. Barry Taniguchi, who's had this store in Hilo forever, and, you know, bringing that into the mix where people can understand who our community is just endearing to the listeners.
Well, how optimistic are you about this Hawaii Nei?
You know, Leslie, I am very concerned about where we're going. I work, another hat that I wear, Leslie, is economic development. And I find that, isn't that odd as a Hawaiian being in economic development? But if I don't get involved and make sure that the culture is okay, then I don't feel that I've done my duty here. And on Hawaii Island economic development is into sustainability, is into getting back, instead of shipping everything in, growing it, making sure that our island can be sustainable. And it's hard. You know, there's lots of stuff going on that are influencing, lots of pressures with Mauna Kea issues, lots of pressure with water rights issues. And we just had an earth shake in October of '06 that devastated water on our island to get the cattle fed, you know, with fresh water. I mean, who's going to replace those ditches, you know? It was a wake-up call for us on the neighbor island folks, that we've got to ensure, you know, that we're strong and healthy. You know how they say you've been at the right place at the right time? I think I was very lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time, to be able to have mentors take me in and want to train me, like Pilahi Paki is one of my, a very stalwart woman who I just admired, and who taught me so much about who we are and what we are as a Hawaiian, and made me proud of who I was. I endear myself to people like Mo Keale, who, you know, was this big old bear, you know, but just had that love and aloha for people, and it transcended through his music. There's just so many people who are influence on me that I want to thank them for helping to shape me, because if they didn't share their stories, I wouldn't have them to share with other people.
Of all of the musicians, the entertainers, and others you've come across in your career, who's impressed you the most?
You know, it's funny you would say that. There were people, like I mentioned earlier, Alvin Kaleolani Isaacs was a dear man who had that 30s and 40s era. And then in the 50s and 60s, I would have to say there was people like Ed Kenny and Marlene Sy, and those people and those voices that shaped Hawaiian music that I gravitated to as dearing friends. And then in the 70s, it would have to be my friend Gabby Pahinui. I loved Pops. He just transcended this down-home earthiness about him, with that little kolohe style like Israel, always getting himself in trouble with his wife. And but just this raw, loving, caring person. And then, of course, my friends from when I went to college, high school, Robert and Roland Casimiro, and you know, we were all at school at the same time. Keola and Kapona Beamer, they were all much older than I am, but you know, that era of music too. So.
Skylark continues to share her voice and her stories, hosting radio shows, and for 30 years, the Merrie Monarch Festival of Hula. She has a beautiful voice, and she is a beautiful voice, speaking with understanding and love of the islands. Mahalo to fellow broadcasters Skylark Rossetti, and you for joining me for this wonderful long story short. I'm Leslie Wilcox of PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho kako.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is produced in HD by PBS Hawaii with Sony technology. High definition, it's in Sony's DNA.
How would you intro a new show that you're doing?
How would I intro? How about from the snow-capped mountains of Mauna Kea to the warm, sunny shores of Waikiki. You're listening to a Hawaiian music that will transcend your heart and deepen your soul. I don't know, I just made something up. I didn't know what you wanted me to do.
Oh, I want you to keep going.
Okay.